All right. Tonight, we're doing our best to log into Salesforce and debug somebody's question here on system.debug.
We're going to debug a question.
All right. So that's the plan.
We actually are debugging a question.
Yeah.
Or did we not pick that one?
No, we totally picked that one.
I think
We're going to totally do
we totally picked it.
The question that we picked. The question is if Salesforce is going to actually let me log in or not. So our question this evening is by this person that I'm lots of ways to pronounce
You're
the name.
You're going to butcher the name, but go for it.
Do it. Butcher it.
Manaj Deshmukh. That's the best I'm going to get.
Sure.
I'm actually trying to log into Salesforce right now, but Salesforce is not being the most friendly environment for me, I guess you could say. So the question of the evening is, anyone share real-time scenario using map? And there was a lot of debate internally here at system.debug as to what this question meant. And I said, you know what, I'm running with it. I'm going to go with it no matter what. So our goal today is try to debug a real-time scenario using map. My guess on the developer forum of Salesforce is that we're looking at this from a developer's perspective, in which case we need to know what's a map in Salesforce or in Apex.
What the heck is a map in this scenario? What is this guy talking about? What is this person? Let's just say, because I don't know if it's a guy or a girl. What is this person talking about? So do you want to hit the interior, the Apex map first, and then maybe play around with the idea that it could be an actual map, like Google Maps?
I guess we could. Why not, right?
Right.
Okay, so let's first look at the map class. Okay, so anytime you have any question inside of Salesforce, you can almost always Google what that question is, and then do like a space Apex or a space Salesforce. And it'll either tell you about the standard object that you may be looking for or the actual class that is inside of Apex. Now, in this instance, the map class explains that a map is a method, or the map methods are all instant methods. That doesn't make any sense, does it?
You're totally butchering this.
I know.
A map is a collection of key value pairs.
I know this, but do you?
This guy. This guy.
Okay, so it is a collection of key value pairs, and typically the keys that you will use are strings, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not necessarily always true. You can put anything inside of that key that you need to. Is that correct?
I don't know. I've always used strings. I don't think I've ever tried to throw anything else in there, really. I mean, numbers and crap. But
then that's what I was going to say. It's like the first example, for instance, is an integer in this class.
You can put, so look at the definition right there, the signature. So map T1, T2. So it's anything. It can be whatever you want it to be, whatever object you want it to be. So it can be integer, it can be string, it can be, yeah.
But typically, you're not going to have, I mean, integers may be somewhat logical. However, anything besides an integer or string, I find to be somewhat confusing, is my guess.
Yeah.
Your guess?
I'll go with it. I mean, I usually...
I mean, I don't know. I don't ever actually do it like this.
I either normally use some sort of string that gets calculated out. Either it's been hashed or something to ensure uniqueness. You know, if it's a string where I know that it's going to be unique, I won't go through anything crazy. Like, let's say, account ID.
Right.
Or, contracts by account ID or something like that, But yeah, usually in 99% of what I do, it's some sort of string that it has to be unique, obviously, because it's the keys. You don't want to get those, you can't put a duplicate in there anyway because it'll overwrite what you had in there before. So,
right. And that's like kind of one of the things that you need to remember about a map is it isn't it isn't like a list where you can have exact copies of the same object in the item, correct? Because of the fact
I'm sorry, I faded. I didn't. What did you ask?
So basically, like in a list, you're going to have an array. Okay, that's what a list is it's the equivalent of an array, and you're just going to have a grouping of objects, regardless if they're similar, like kind. They could be the exact same, but you can put them all into the same list, right? Multiple copies of it. A map allows you the ability to access data via a different method, in a sense that it's like, I'm having a hard time, I guess, like explaining this, but it's a matter of whatever is at this index or this point in the key is going to be the data that gets returned. And to Ryan's point previously, it can definitely be overwritten if you assign that key a new value.
Right. Yeah, it allows you to retrieve the members of that list without knowing its position in the array, right? Because generally you would say, give me element 17 if it was just an array, and you'd get something back, whatever's sitting in that slot, right? But because we're assigning a key to it, now you can always just refer to it by key and get that back.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to present my screen, making sure that everybody gets to see it here nice and clear. And we're going to work through just the basics of creating a map inside of Salesforce's Apex language, and what some of the cool things you can actually do with that map are, right? Yeah. So the first thing is to obviously instantiate that map. Okay, if you're going to do it right here at the top, you're going to need to declare its scope, right? Because we're not doing it inside of a method or anything like that. But it's as simple as declaring what you're going to be building, in this case, a map, key string pair, or key value pair, and we're going to want our values to be a string. In other words, any form of text, right? And because we have no idea what kind of, we'll make it easy. We're going to make a map of strings, actually.
There you go.
Boo.
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 I wanted to get intense.
Are they saying boo or boo earns?
What's the other one? I don't get the other one.
You don't like the Simpsons, Z. Anyway.
Let's just create a map of people's first names by their last name.
Oh, nice. That'll be perfect. That'll be perfect.
Nice and easy, and this way we can heckle you, and you're still likely to not get confused.
Well, we're gonna do our best anyway.
Nice.
Peeps names.
What's the what's retrieval time on a map like this?
You mean how? I don't know.
Come on, guys.
I hate you already,
dude.
Guys.
Do you know that answer, RJ? I don't know that answer, nor do I care.
So the first thing we're going to do is instantiate a new map, and the map is actually a string. So this basically is setting it up, saying that on the first, the left-hand assignment of this comma is our key, and our key is going to be a string, and that means that whatever we are using to access this map, we're going to enter a string and get back the value of what that string's the key is, right? Yeah. So let's create a constructor method here.
Public. Yeah, there we go.
I hate you. This is going to be the part that messes me up the most.
Dude, I have to be honest. I'm a developer, and I Google like this stuff all the time. The instantiation of, like the required identifiers and stuff for constructors all the time. I don't bother remembering this stuff. It's right in front of me.
What's my error? Why do I have an error here? Static is not allowed.
Because you have static on the constructor. It's just public, and there you go.
There we go. All right. Thanks, Google. So, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is actually start populating our map. Okay, and in order to populate the map, we're going to use a .put. That's different than the sets or the list commands, which are all .add, in order to add to our collection. So in this case, we're going to use the .put method. So for the map class, what we want to do here is, and it's so funny because a lot of this I could probably be just doing inside of anonymous Apex. So we'll tackle that here in a second. But let's just say we've got multiple names that we want to add directly to our map class right off the bat. Okay. In that case, we're going to call our map class. We're going to call it peeps names, which is what we've named it right up here. And we're going to do a .put. All right. So for sets and for lists, we're going to want to do a .add, because those are for arrays, which is different than the method or the map rather. So let's go with our team name here. We're going to make our keys our last names per Ryan's suggestions, and our first names are values, okay, in order to acquire those. And we'll say that our last name here is Headley. It's crazy. Yep. My dad knew how to spell your name, but I didn't.
I'm offended. You didn't know how to spell my... Sorry, I'm just kidding. I always spell your Brian with an I instead of a Y anyway, so...
I mean, it happens, right? Okay, so let's let's go into our anonymous Apex, because this will be a lot easier to deal with that way.
Sure.
Just for debugging sake. All right, so we're going to have our same name here. Our map string, peeps, names, equals. And then inside of here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do peeps.
Peeps
names dot put. And we're going to say Headley.
Yeah.
In a
Except
string.
it's a string.
It's a string.
There we go.
Not a variable. Headley, comma, Ryan.
Okay, I'll answer to Rattan as well. That's fine.
Is that something that works for you?
Whatever, man. You'd be surprised what I answer to these days. All right, let's go.
So many things.
Don't lose it. Hill, there it is.
I'm on it. We want it lowercase. I'll show you why in a second, because it makes it easier for me.
That's fine.
And then RJ. Okay. And because I'm here and I feel left out at times, I'm going to go ahead and do mine too.
I hope you feel left out all the time.
I feel left out a lot of the time.
You deserve it.
There we go. We have a map.
We have a map. And all this is a matter of string value pairs. And if we wanted to system.debug this, namesake.
Yeah, see what we did there? That's where our name comes from.
And that's the end of the show.
That's the end of the series.
Thank you for tuning in.
And then what's really cool about the debugger that I like is the fact that you can do debug only down here. And it hides all that extra crap that no one cares about. I'm sure people care about it, but for me, I right now don't.
Generally, I'm going right to the debug statement.
That's right. Yeah. That's why I put them there. So as you can see, we have our map here: Headley, Ryan, Hill, RJ, James, Brian. Okay. And what we would do with this is
we could actually. You should probably zoom in a little bit if you can.
All right.
Ooh, now look at that. I can see that. Old people like me can see it.
Look at that.
All right. So this is how we get the data. This is how we get the data into an actual map. All right. And what this allows us to do is build, if you're familiar with JSON, a very similar object type structure to JSON, right? Where you are you can loop through it, you can pull data out based on its key value, you can check against that key value, and that's something I actually have to do constantly. Is like when I'm looping through things, I'm trying to figure out whether or not something even exists, right? So let's just say we were going to create an if statement, okay? And we only wanted to present the name if it had a specific key involved with it. We'll say it's Hill. All right. So in this instance, if we wanted to use one of the functionalities that Salesforce has given us, which is the .contains key, we can say if names .contains key and put Hill in here.
You put like 4 more semicolons in there.
Put a couple more in there.
You write some Lisp.
It's like a developer habit. I type a letter and a semicolon always at the end. I'll erase it later.
You should see my emails full of semicolons.
Oh, the ladies like it. No, not semicolons. Fair enough.
Going on. So now,
anyway,
are we going to system.debug peeps names?
We are, but only if they contain the word Hill. Okay,
right?
Because if peeps names contains Hill, then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to get the value of that, correct? So at that point, we can do the .get, and the .get is what's actually handling the ability to pull that value out, right? So if we're correct, this is going to have our. It should just say RJ.
So let's talk about this real quick, though, while you run it. So the idea here is that every single value has a unique key, right? So insertion is constant time, and retrieval is constant time, which makes it extremely fast, way faster than a list, right? Which is usually
iterable.
So it has to iterate over pretty much you can assume if it's the last item, it has to iterate over everything before the last item. So you always want to assume worst case scenario, right? So that's O of n rather than constant time, and it takes a lot longer to go through a list, right? So now what you're doing essentially is you've put this thing in there by a key. It knows exactly where this thing is in memory, like exactly where. It doesn't have to like run through this whole stupid idea of looping through things. And that's why you notice there's no looping in here at all. You guys haven't seen any loops, no for loops, no while, no nothing of the sort, right? And that's because it's strictly looking it up by the key. So now what we're doing is it's looking through the whole thing and saying, hey, are there any keys that look like Hill in here at all? So it's going to, that whole thing, it's going to look through that whole entire list of keys. So it's going to go Headley, nope. James, nope. Hill, yeah, okay, cool. It's going to give us a true there, check. It's going to drop us down to that system debug peeps names.get Hill, and then it's going to go actually retrieve the value that is stored in that slot for Hill, in the slot for the key Hill.
Yeah.
Now, something to remember about maps, okay? Maps and sets. These are not sortable in a sense that most people would think of sortable, right? RJ? And I specifically mentioned RJ because I know RJ actually created a hash map, I believe, at some point to determine how it was hashed out, correct?
A long time ago. But right. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, you don't really do a lot of other because it's not a traditional list. If you need something for sorting, if you need these are stored in a certain order, by the way. And if you really wanted to, you could get all the keys and you could sort them, but it defeats the whole entire purpose. So if you're going to try to sort something, use something that is sortable by nature. So
yes.
a list, an array, any of those items are sortable by nature. They have built-in functions for that. You can override those functions if you need to sort it in a different way. There's a lot of other things that you can do there that make using a list for sorting stuff far superior to using a dictionary, a map, or a hash map, because it would be.
No, but can you explain why you can't alphabetize, or why it sorts differently, right? Like, what's the difference?
It doesn't sort at all. So the whole entire thing is, so there's maps and there's hash maps and there's dictionaries, right? And dictionary, like if you think about it traditionally, right, as in physical object to computer object, right? Dictionary, the physical object, is very much like a dictionary, the computer object, right? Or the programmatic object. If you look through a dictionary, you're looking and saying, oh, well, I need to find XYZ. It knows in memory where to look. So just like you would flip through the pages of a dictionary and say, well, I'm looking for a word that starts with W. I'm looking for whale. You go to the W section right away. You don't have to look through every single page and every single entry to find the whale. You flip right to WH, boom, and you're on it. And that's very similar to how a hash map and a map and a dictionary computationally work. It knows where everything is. You don't want to jumble that up, because that's there for a reason. That's why it's so fast.
Well, there's usually never a need to sort the items in a map. Yeah, just to your point,
Yeah.
right? I mean, because you're going after a specific thing. You've populated that map, and you want to be able to get at it later by some known value that you're going to know, right?
Yeah.
So
it would be the same thing as using strings to add integers. Why not just use integers? It's not, you're using the thing the wrong way, and so it's not gonna work reliably for you, and therefore you should really fall back to something that's going to work in a more reliable way, in a more predictable fashion, with that same idea, with that same thing that you want to accomplish. So again, list, array, things like that, you can just jump in there. They have sort methods. You can override them. You can put any kind of thing in there that you want. Like let's say you want to sort by, I don't know, you have a list of objects and you want to sort by some property on the object. You can override the sort to sort by whatever property it is that you want to sort by.
And now, mind you, like when we're talking about sorting, what we're talking about specifically is the keys themselves. Okay, we're not talking about the data that's in the value, because even though we've used strings here as our value, these can be any type of object available inside of Salesforce. They can be integers, they can be Booleans, they can be actual objects such as lists or sets or anything that you'd want to store at this point inside of the map. Okay. So
Yep.
in our use case, you know, you may look at it and you're like, well, it's a string comparison. So how would I use this? What's a really good use case for this beyond obviously the peeps names? Okay. And where I've used this in the past, and especially at a ISV, because we have to program things dynamically, right? So sometimes we're talking about things like name fields on side or inside of objects. Okay. And by that, I mean like any custom object and most standard objects have a name field. Okay. But some objects don't. Objects like case, for instance, don't have a name field. They have a case number, right? Same with work orders. Don't have a name field. They have a work order number. All right. And in instances like that, when you're actually, when a user is trying to view the name field and they're trying to do it dynamically, you know, you may be going through it, and with any other custom object, you would put the name field here, right? You would just automatically add that to, say, your dynamic query or whatever have you. But in some instances, we are going to want to check to make sure that it's not one of our objects that is a special object, right? And so we might check to say, hey, if the map that we're looking at contains the S object API name that we're coming through with, such as case, then we're going to want to get that field.
Yep.
Right.
Case number.
And so you might find that, especially with dynamic programming, when you're utilizing the schema class and stuff like that, where you need special kind of one-off circumstances. There's many other ways to get this information. With the schema described, you can figure out what the relationships are, what the name fields are, and all that kind of stuff. But sometimes that can be taxing on the system when you know there's only a couple of objects and the map is so fast to just build that out.
Yeah.
That's an interesting use case for it. I had not ever thought of doing it that, you know, using that for that. You know, a lot of times what I use is, you know, I guess a good example would be get all the objects related to a specific account and then store the account ID as the key. And then, you know, at some point I want to loop over one of these specific accounts if it matches criteria or whatever, all of their contacts or all of their, it maybe have a custom relationship there. So I'll store the account ID and then a list of the related objects in the next thing and do some sort of operation on each of those lists, you know. So yeah, it can get pretty deep, you know, lists of lists and
oh,
such,
absolutely.
but
And that's why you got to figure out what your best case scenario is. Maps are really powerful, and to tell you the truth, they're probably something. It's definitely a go-to object for me, or not a Apex class, because they become really, really useful as long as you know how to use them. Right. And that's why I brought up sorting before, because if you're looking for sortability, you're not going to want to use a map.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Not at all.
And I can see the use case there. I can see where people are kind of like, I still want all of this stuff organized in a very readable way, but that's where extra logic is just going to come into play.
I believe James Lowry from Minnesota, fellow MVP, he did a presentation. I don't know if he still does it on like the 10 commandments of a Salesforce developer. And one of his commandments, if I recall correctly, and if James, you're out there somewhere and listening, feel free to call me wrong, but I want to say he has one of them that says something along the lines of thou shalt select data into maps. So he uses maps a lot of the time as a default. You know how sometimes you do a select
and that's
into a list
for mapping to the IDs of the actual object. It's fantastic for that. I completely agree. And whenever you're doing like any aggregate data, like the aggregate results, those are all going to go into a map.
Yep.
You know, so it's going to be the exact same commands. Plus, if you are working with database.query, then
Oh yeah.
that is all a map. It's the exact same commands.
Yeah, doesn't it return a map?
Yeah, it returns a map, and you can do a .get, and you can do a .contains key, and you can whatever else. So a lot of times maps become like a big, hard, heavy lifter in order to remove a whole bunch of code.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of time, I think, isn't there in triggers, there's like old map and new map and things like that. So you can get it triggered out old map to get a map of the object that's being updated or hit by ID as well, by default, just by saying like new map equals triggered out old map or whatever.
Yep.
Yep. So I've used those before too. So yeah, they're very useful. So assuming that this is what this person was talking about, we could just go in and put a link to this podcast, right? You know, self promotion.
So I think that's what you got to do.
We have a question though. What the hell is a real-time map or real-time whatever? We'll go back to the question. What was the question?
I think what they're asking for is a real world scenario there.
Oh, you think so? Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone share real-time scenario using? Okay, yeah. Okay.
So I did
a real-world scenario using map. Well, we did. I mean, I guess that's a real-world scenario. You're right.
Assuming that's the kind of map they're actually looking for.
I mean, otherwise I can just share a link to Google Maps.
Well, I mean, all right. So a real-world scenario using map, very simply, very plainly, is database.query, right?
Right.
That's the simplest one. You query sockle junk, whatever kind of junk you want to query, accounts, yada yada. You pull it back, it's a map, period. So that's one, right? Another real world scenario using map is just strictly like I lost it. Spell check. I was trying to think of my my projects way back in the day in undergrad. Spell check is a great real-time scenario using map, and I say that not completely in jest. If you do, let's say you have a list of words and their correct spelling, and you want to check all the words in your document or whatever, and you roll your own little text editor. If you're using an array list or a list to run through the words, you're going to be there forever. That thing's going to run forever. And our teacher actually let us do that and run the application with the list, and it just crashed.
Just tanked.
Yeah, it totally tanked. And she's brilliant. Her name's Anya. She's a wonderful human being. She was like, yeah, here's a test document. And she gave us like Hamlet or something. And she was like, yeah, just autocorrect Hamlet. And it's just running, just tanks, right? And then she's like, all right, we'll see. Here's the thing. Swap it to a map. Make it a map. And so everyone in the class starts, fiddling around. It's like 5-10 minutes later, everyone's like, okay, we're done. And everyone's running in. Their eyes are just like, bonk, because it's running like instantly. It's like near real time. It's boom. The whole entire document done.
But that's the whole reason behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So very high level, but that's what a map is. And at any point, I'm going to share this link once we publish this video with Manoj here on his dev forum question.
I really hope that's how you say his name.
And if you're watching it, Dr. M, I got nothing.
Dr. M, that was.
All right. So if you're watching this and you have any actual questions beyond this, because we definitely didn't answer yours, reach out to us at system.debug on Twitter, or ask RJ specifically at
the infamous RJ.
The infamous RJ. Yeah, he'll answer any questions you have.
Feel free to yell at me or whatever if you want to. Ask me questions, yell at me, whatever you feel like doing.
Yeah. There you go. We were unable to stump Brian today, like get him thrown off track. He did really well.
Yeah. I don't want to admit it, so I'm going to let you admit it.
We're going to do a better job next time. But honestly, if you have some questions that you'd like us to answer online, we were going to try to find a really fun one. This one came up, but most of these would take a lot of the time more than we have in order to answer. So if you have a question you want us to answer on air, please let us know.
Absolutely.
That would be so much
Don't
fun.
bump us out yet. Sorry, I said don't bump us out yet. I gotta fix the bump.
You're,
Anyway,
you bump in the night.
things that go. But can I bump us out now?
And also, hold on, real quick.
Oh no, we're not gonna do it. Yeah. Okay. What's up?
I was gonna say if we didn't answer the question and you're talking about a completely different map, Google is your friend, and just search Google Maps API, and that'll help you right there. Hopefully.
I the more we went on with this, though, I totally think that Brian is correct, and so this person was probably just asking, "Hey, in what scenario would I ever want to use an Apex map
versus a list or a set?"
Versus a list.
I wish you would have said that, because that would have really clarified.
Yeah,
so that's a good point. Be clear.
Clear.
Clear. I was gonna say concise, and then I was like clear. So fine.
Concise.
Oh
yeah. No. Honestly, I mean, I understand English is not everyone's first language. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. Just try to maybe throw in a couple extra things that you can compare it to in there. Like we were just saying, if you say, hey, what's a real-time scenario for a map? Just say versus a list or something like that. You know what I'm saying? That would really help clarify on the forums out there.
But we hope we helped you.
I hope.
Hopefully.
I hope.
And if not, you provided us with a half an hour of content, and that is valuable to us.
I really appreciate it.
All righty.
Everyone, you have a great night.
I think I'm going to hit the bump now.
Please.
Do it.
Have a good night, everyone.